Let's talk to our guy Joe DeLeone, shall we? Talk a little college football, talk a little Super Bowl, talk a little NFL draft. It's never too early, especially for a guy that was at the Senior Bowl last week and a half ago, up close and personal with some of the best college football players in the country. He is the host of the Ruffino and Joe Show and the Hack City Pod, and he covers college football and the NFL for A to Z Sports. Follow him on Twitter at Joe DeLeone. He's also got that god-awful Devils hat on once again. Islanders beating the Devils last week. It was another big W for the Isles, so I hope you liked that one. Joe, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing good, minus the slight there from. Admittedly, I've not been watching enough hockey now that the NFL season's over. I'm going to dive plenty deep in there, but I'm doing great. It feels weird that there's no football on. It means I can be distraction free watching tape for the next couple of months. The combine's right around the corner. It might not be football season, but it's still a great time of year.
Oh, for sure, especially with you. I mean, there's nobody that grinds more tape than you, brother. Look, you along with the majority of folks were right on Seattle, and so I'll give a little slight back at myself here. I thought I was sharp with my Super Bowl pick. Not so much. Their defense was incredible. Kenneth Walker had a great game, and Jason Myers single-footedly outscored the Patriots. Christian Gonzalez and Matt Collins were both awesome in the loss for New England, but we've had this debate on the show this week. We asked both Mark Schlereth and Allen Robinson about it, and so we'll ask you, Joe, who do you think should have been Super Bowl MVP?
Myers. I think it should have been Myers. I was tweeting. I'm an ass for probably doing this. I was tweeting it during the game, and then I was in Boston with a couple of people that I work with. We were shooting some content. One of the guys was a Patriots fan, and the whole game I just kept saying, Myers better win MVP. Myers better win MVP. Kenneth Walker played great. I get it. He played great. He had a good game. But Myers put all the dang points on the board. The one time you had the chance to give it to a kicker and you don't give it to a kicker. And I know I'm kind of biased because I'm a former long snapper in college. I'm, of course, going to battle for my guys. It's disappointing that they didn't at least consider it. It felt like it was just a foregone conclusion. You got to give it to Kenneth Walker. If he doesn't hit all those field goals, do they win the game? Probably.
You're preaching to the choir.
Confidently?
You're preaching to the choir, Joe. Yeah. Sorry. You're preaching to the choir. I thought I was maybe.
No, I stand by that.
I got told I was a jury on Mark Schlereth. Nobody cares about kickers. You can never give it to a kicker. That's a former offensive lineman. But I'm glad, we got a representation for the special teams guys. Long snapper like yourself, special teams unit. Those guys, no longer should they get overlooked. And Jason Myers still got overlooked. But what are you going to do?
I honestly believe that awkward silence was completely appropriate there, gentlemen, with the Jason Myers pick. But I'll just leave it at that. Joe, let's talk about the team that was the runner-up in the Super Bowl this year, the New England Patriots. Again, as you mentioned, they were battered and bruised on the ground by Walker the Third in this year's big game. Drake May was also trapped in a state of bewilderment, it seemed like, for almost the entire game. They're picking at number 31 overall in the NFL draft this year. What do you believe will be the primary area of focus in round one? Are they going to go offense or defense? And whatever side you go with there, any good fits, any players you think that could slide right in and do some damage straight away, whether on the offensive side or defensive side?
Yeah, I know that there's going to be probably a lot of discussion with, do they go after a left tackle so that they can relocate Will Campbell? Vrabel came out and said that they're not going to do that. I do think it's worth considering bolstering their offensive line. I think that offense has to be the priority. Their defense was the reason why they made it this far. Their offense struggled during the playoffs, but their defense kept winning them games by forcing turnovers, getting huge stops, producing sacks. They got after Sam Darnold in the Super Bowl, but they just could not get him down. I think that you need to look at right tackle. Maxi Inachor, the Arizona State offensive lineman who had a really good Senior Bowl, is a name to pay attention to. He is a little bit more developmental, but he is a guy who could eventually become a nice cornerstone along your offensive line. I think within the interior, there are plenty of options for them to turn to really build up that guard group that they have. They got to get more protection for Drake May just overall. So we need to just forget Will Campbell circumstance, find him a supporting cast. Find him a group of guys that are going to help elevate him and play better around him. I like the idea of either Vega Ione from Penn State, Emmanuel Pregnon from Oregon, or Chase Basantis from Texas A&M. In the first round, all three of those guys should be on the table. They've got really great traits. They're all pretty physical. They've got really powerful lower bodies. They would be able to jump right into that offensive line and contribute very, very early on. And at the very least, if they don't want to go offensive line, or maybe some of their guys are off the board, this is a really good receiver class. And I think the Super Bowl kind of showed not only is their offensive line maybe set up to help Drake May succeed, outside of Stephon Diggs, they need another big-time receiver, and they need someone younger. Diggs is towards the end of his career. Who knows what happens with his legal situation? I like the idea of someone like KC Concepcion from Texas A&M who has a ton of juice and is super explosive. The idea of one of the Indiana receivers, Elijah Surratt or Omar Cooper. There's going to be a lot of really, really good options for the Patriots, and I think that the overall focus needs to be on offense.
Oh, I love that as a fantasy football player. So keep your eyes peeled. We're going to see if they bring in some additional weapons here for Drake May. Joe, as you're aware, Pat is a giant New York Giants fan, and over at NFL Mock Draft Central right now, the consensus, and I'm putting that in air quotes, has the G-Men taken Ohio State wide receiver Carnell Tate at number 5 overall, but only 24% of mock drafts tracked have him going there with a defensive back end so woeful last year for this organization. What do you feel John Harbaugh and company are going to focus on? They're going to go with a wide receiver like Tate, or possibly the best DB on the board at that point in the draft? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think that it's far better for them to prioritize defensive back or maybe even offensive line at that spot. I think that, as I just talked about here, the wide receiver class is so good that you can find a good option on day 2. And that is when you're going to want to grab somebody. They don't need a primary receiver. They have Malik Neighbors. They have a really good slot receiver in Wan'Dale Robinson. I think it'd be much better to look for that tertiary guy that could be impactful and play a specific role instead of investing a high draft pick on Carnell Tate. Carnell Tate is a good player, but he is not an otherworldly wide receiver prospect like the Jamar Chases of the world. He is going to be a really great pro, but I'd much rather, if I'm going to draft a receiver that early, feel that he is going to be Malik Neighbors-esque or, have a Marvin Harrison type of a tape and build and traits. Tate will be good, but they're better off going to his Ohio State teammate, Caleb Downs. I really, really think that Caleb Downs is exactly the type of guy that John Harbaugh wants. He could not fit the system any better. A instinctual, heady defensive back who could play all over the place. How many times have we seen elite safeties play in Baltimore's defenses? I think that there is such an opportunity here to grab Downs, fix your secondary, but also improve your run defense. Caleb Downs is an awesome run defender and a great tackler. So he could be that missing piece, the middle linebacker of your secondary. Would just like to throw in, I like the idea of Francis Maui-Noah for Miami as well. If they don't bring back Jermaine Illuminor, the price tag is too big. Get younger. Maui-Noah is one of the most no-brainer prospects in this class that I will constantly pound the table for and say teams should just take him and not overthink it.
Like that.
Jermaine Illuminor has been really, really good, and you actually finally got some stable, healthy offensive line playing, Joe. I don't know if I want to screw with that, but I get it. You got to pay. You can only pay a certain amount of people, but man, I could not agree with you more on Caleb Downs. I've been saying it for weeks. Look, they can't all come from Notre Dame and be elite like Kyle Hamilton, but I guess a guy from Ohio State wouldn't be too shabby. He would be the next Kyle Hamilton. He would be phenomenal. So, yes, please, from your lips to that, I'll be nice. From your lips to Joe Shane's ears. Hopefully he gets that one right. All right, we're talking with Joe DeLeone here, host of the Ruffino and Joe Show and the Hack City Pod. He covers the NFL Draft, college football, and the NFL for A to Z Sports. You can follow him on Twitter at Joe DeLeone. He's with us here on BetMGM tonight. Brad Evans, Pat Boyle. Joe, Brad asked you about New England's draft, so I want to ask you about Seattle. They have their own pick in each of the first 3 rounds, but not much after that. A decent amount of cap space. We'll see how much that changes a day or two into free agency. So at 32, with the first pick, or with the last pick in the first round of the draft, How can the Seahawks and John Schneider make this team even better? What player do you think they should go after? And if not a specific player, what position do you think Seattle has to address the most?
Yeah, I think that there are a couple of needs that they can go after based on the quality of this draft class. Maybe they would consider a receiver to have a running mate for Jackson Smith and Jigba if they don't end up bringing back Rashid Shaheed, who could end up being expensive in free agency. I do think that the interior of their offensive line is the position group to pay the closest attention to. I mentioned Ione, I mentioned Pregnon, I mentioned Basantis. To not repeat the breakdown of those players, any of them would make a lot of sense. But I would also throw in here, with Boye Mafe being a free agent and his production was solid, if there is a pass rusher that McDonald falls in love with, I could totally see that being the selection. There are a bunch of options. You've got the two designated pass rusher type guys with R. Mason Thomas from Oklahoma and Cassius Howell from Texas A&M. I think that Howell, he's a player who is fit, needs to be in the right situation to work because he's got really limited length, but he's super explosive and he's got great hands. Putting him on a team that's got some solid depth and a really creative defensive mind like McDonald, I think he plays to his potential. But the last one, a guy who's been building a lot of momentum lately, Akeem Mesidor, the pass rusher from Miami, the other pass rusher that now people are starting to realize was really good and almost as productive, actually was as productive as Ruben Bain. There's a possibility he would make sense. Mesidor is a much older prospect. He is, I believe he's 25 years old. He's not going to be for every team. But when you just won a Super Bowl and you want somebody who's experienced, who's got unbelievable technique and nuance the way that he plays the position, it would make sense for Seattle to grab him so that they could get an immediate impact.
Good stuff there. Joey, you were talking about wide receivers and how deep this class and how talented it is this year. So let's dig in a little bit deeper on that. Of the back half projected round one wide receivers, who do you believe has more long-term upside? Your boy, KC Concepcion out of Texas A&M, Makai Lemon out of USC, or Denzel Boston out of Washington? Is it indeed Concepcion or the other two guys?
I think it's Concepcion. I'm going to put a qualifier on Makai Lemon. I think that Lemon's going to go much earlier than the back end. I think that he could be somebody who's considered in the teens, maybe earlier than that. I think a lot of teams are going to fall in love with his film. I'm curious to see how he tests, but if he tests well enough, Lemon is the type of guy that could be an immediate impact, 1,000-yard receiver. So technically I'm going with Lemon, but I think if I had to pick between the players that likely will be picked in the, the 20 to 40 range, I would go with KC Concepcion. I think there's a lot more that you can do with Concepcion. He is an unbelievable speedster. He could be a great kick and punt returner. He does a lot after the catch. His impact was so tangible and noticeable for Texas A&M. When he was having a big game, it was some of the biggest performances for that Texas A&M offense. My only thing with Boston, I always have a lot of pause with these big-bodied catch-point guys. Keon Coleman was one of them. N'Keal Harry was another. I'm not comparing him to those two guys specifically. If I had to pick between the two, I'm going with somebody who's more explosive compared to who's got the bigger frame.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Joe DeLeone with us here for another 2 minutes or so. Follow him on Twitter at Joe DeLeone here on BetMGM tonight. Joe, finally, I know we're still 2.5 months away. But like I said, not many people grind tape and continuously talk draft like you do. So as we creep closer to the NFL draft, what do you think becomes one of the biggest storylines? And you can take this anywhere you want. Is it how many QBs get taken in the first round? Is there going to be another one after Fernando Mendoza? What is a player in your mind that shoots up into the top 5? What's going to make this year's draft incredibly interesting on night one?
I think it is the quarterback stuff. And I know that's a little bit cliche. One bit that it hasn't necessarily been talked about very much, but has a lot of potential to just shift everything, is what happens with Trinidad Chambliss, the Ole Miss quarterback, who is fighting to get another year of eligibility. It seems like he might be able to come back this upcoming year, but it's unclear. If he ends up having to go to the NFL and he has to or enter this draft class, I think that there is going to be a really interesting race for who is going to be QB2. Now, if he doesn't, Ty Simpson is the only viable option for teams that need to figure out their quarterback future. that isn't a bit more of a risk, like if they took a Drew Aller or a Garrett Nussmeier or a Carson Beck, someone along those lines. I think that the most compelling thing that I'm paying attention to is how early Simpson can go. Is he somebody that somebody just freaks out and says, we can't miss out on this guy, we need to trade up, and he gets taken in the top 5? Or is this a more of a Jackson Dart type of a situation where he goes in the back end of the first and teams are going to be patient? I think that when there's so few options, it is going to create a demand at a position that we all know is super, super important. And I think that Dart provides a really good example where if you had asked any team that wishes they had a quarterback this year, they would have traded up and taken Jackson Dart. Don't miss out on Simpson if you like Ty Simpson.
All right. We'll see if the Jets, if they get super desperate. If they don't take a quarterback or two, maybe they jump back in, or maybe they get one with their second pick in that first round. Either way, Joe, we appreciate it as always, brother. Can't wait to chat with you next week.
Of course. Thanks, guys.
See you, Joe.
There you go. Joe DeLeone, host of Ruffino and Joe Show and the Hack City Pod. Follow him on Twitter at Joe DeLeone.